Support for WYES is made possible by Mary Lou Kristovich in memory of her husband, William Kristovich.
Good evening. Tonight we will discuss the current New Orleans restaurant scene, ever-changing. I'm Peggy Scott Laborde, and welcome to Steppin' Out. Here we discuss food, arts, and entertainment on a weekly basis. But tonight, food, glorious food. Seated at our table, Poppy Tooker, host of the radio program Louisiana Eats, airing twice weekly on WWNO Radio. Making her Steppin' Out debut, Helen Freund, food writer for Gambit Weekly. Good to see you.
Good to see
Hi,
you.
we're delighted you're here. And of course, Ian McNulty, who covers the food and restaurant scene for the New Orleans Advocate. Welcome, welcome.
Thanks very much.
Ian, we will have you kick this off to talk about restaurant hubs, the neighborhoods where we tend to find a lot of restaurants.
Sure. You know, Peggy, there's so many restaurants now around New Orleans. Sometimes you don't even have to pick one before you go out. You can go to a certain part of town and make up your mind when you get there. It's like a food courts spread across these neighborhoods. Magazine Street for a long time has had this down, right? You could just cruise certain blocks of Magazine Street and like, oh, that looks good. Oh, I forgot about this place. Well, that template has been expanded to a lot of different parts of town. Probably the most well-known example, which is really a great example since Katrina, Ferret Street. Started with basically nothing after Hurricane Katrina, and a few pioneers came in and others followed their lead, and now the stampede is on, of course. But you know, you just drive along Ferret Street, along just a handful of blocks, and what do you have? I mean, all of us probably have our favorites along there, but that's been pretty amazing.
Manali's is not right directly there, but it's not far. We should say it's in the neighborhood.
Yeah, sure.
But so
count
many
that.
just
Yeah.
along Ferret.
Yeah,
Bar
the Oyster
Francis.
Bar Francis.
The Ferret Beer Room. Have you eaten there?
Yeah, it's great.
Really upscale food.
One of the fun things about these places, I think, is that you don't have to pick one either. You know, very often I'll take people to town. We'll start at Manali's for oysters a couple blocks away, and then end up at Hi Hat or cocktails and bar snacks at Cure. Bar Francis, another great option. It just keeps growing and growing.
Dinner.
Yeah, you can show people so many different things, especially the out-of-towners who love to, you know, they don't want to sit down for one meal, right? They want to try different things throughout the night. But another great thing is you're seeing more of these hubs develop in other parts of town. In Mid-City, of course.
I was just going to say, Mid-City.
Canal and Carrollton has kind of had been that for a long time with Venetia's, with Andrew Brocato's for dessert afterwards. I'm surprised if Venetia sells any dessert at all. I mean, if you're going to Venetia, you're going to go to Andrew Brocato's afterwards for gelato, right? Of course. But then other parts of Mid-City have been developing that too. And the one that's emerged most recently, of course, near the hospitals and the courthouse.
Tulane Avenue. Whoever would think there'd be so much good food on Tulane Avenue?
Yeah, Tulane and Broad.
And Broad.
Yeah.
And both sides of Bank Street. When Bank Street starts moving in another direction.
Well, let's remind people, in case they're not familiar with it, what are some restaurants on Tulane and Broad?
Well, almost everything about the list is new within the last 2 or 3 years. Avery's Po' Boys might be the oldest one that I can think of from this new crop. They opened all of maybe 2012, 2013 maybe, which qualifies it as an old timer in that scene now. But much more recently, you've got Margie's Grill.
Love it.
Got Pharmacy, spelled with an F, a little single shotgun clubhouse of an eatery there, yeah. You've got Melt directly across the street. Go a little further up Tulane Avenue, there's a great Honduran place. I remember you wrote this up very recently, Helen, in Gambit.
Yeah.
Help me fill in the blanks here. What am I forgetting? For sure.
That place
And
is fantastic.
Boswell's, which has been around for a while, the Jamaican place,
the Jamaican place, indispensable.
Treo, upscale
Treo.
Cocktails and delicious food from Michael Galata.
Tana, that's right.
And the Curious Eater, of course, is going to venture into Lady Al, the ideal market we used to call it pre-Katrina. you know, which
Yes.
has evolved into this amazing Latin American market for just the hot lunch line alone. You know,
Yeah,
you can go in there
Mid-City,
for.
rocking too. And we should, of course, always remember the quarter. Okay, that's not new, but it's ever there, where there are tons of restaurants, old and new there.
Well, isn't that the great thing about New Orleans dining? You get your new things, but then your old beloved things sometimes feel fresh and new again when you give them another look.
Absolutely.
We would be
Barbecue, huh?
But we would be remiss to
uh-huh.
leave this topic without mentioning Aretha Castle Haley.
That's-
because
oh,
just
that's
as
true.
surprising
Yes,
as Ferret
yes.
Street is to us old New Orleanians,
Of course.
really amazing to me, Aretha Castle Haley. So
Casa Borrega was sort of the pioneer.
absolutely, they were.
And Primitivo, Adolfo Garcia.
Unfortunately, he's just
involved.
closed.
Yes.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
no.
That great View Carré food court is so cool, and of course, Cafe Reconcile doing all their good work.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But about barbecue,
yes,
now
because
whoever-
nearby, I know one of your favorites is near there.
Who would ever think we would talk barbecue in New Orleans? I don't know how New Orleans missed the barbecue train, but we did until about the last, what do y'all think, 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, we started seeing smoke signals a few years ago. I mean, you got to give credit to the joint down in the Bywater. Even before Katrina, they were doing this slow and low barbecue style. You know, New Orleans has always had some barbecue, but not what anybody in these true barbecue regions would consider real barbecue. They wouldn't get any cred to it, right? I mean, it's second line barbecue.
Yeah,
it's backyard
yeah.
barbecue. Well,
Kermit. It's
yeah.
Kermit's barbecue.
Exactly. Hey, it's delicious. It's covered in sauce. You know, you're eating it, you're drinking, having a good time. That was what New Orleans barbecue was. But I think, you know, Helen, I've seen your stories in the Gambit tracking this too. What are some of the ones that came up for you?
I mean, it seems like in the last couple of years you've seen sort of the biggest jump. So as far as Frey smoked meat in Mid-City,
Oh, yes.
which is great. Blue Oak, of course, after their tenure in Chickawawa, and they're fantastic. Central City barbecue,
Central City
right, which is
blows my mind.
all everyone's talking about right now.
You couldn't have paid me money to get me to ever believe I was going to sit in a really delicious restaurant hearing really great music and see the Gust Housing Project in spitting distance. It just never seemed like where I was going to find a really fine restaurant, and I think Central City barbecue rocks.
Well, people will travel for good barbecue. It's one of those destination kind of flavors, right? And because New Orleans doesn't have that, oh, I've always gone to this place, this is the place in our neighborhood. If you hear about a really good barbecue place somewhere, you're going to hit the road for it.
Back to Fry. It's so funny because as we will remember, Fry Meats was a
Of
very
course.
famous name,
Right.
F-R-E-Y, okay. And it turns out that the owner is a relative, is a descendant of Fry.
And
I
of course,
love
that's
that.
Ray Gretzky, who had Rue 127, so he's done
He's
his
got
fine
that,
dining
yes.
thing, but his new place, Fry, it looks like it could be replicable. You
Behind
know?
the Office Depot. That's how I tell.
Yeah,
people, you know.
behind the Office Depot.
And moving on to Mexican.
Mexican, yeah. I mean, we've seen a lot of Mexican restaurants open in the past couple of years. A couple that have closed recently too. Mazado, and what was the other
That'll
place?
be
La
Zia.
Casita.
Oh yeah, La Casita, which I think is possibly maybe moving on to another location, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen the last of them. Of course, they have their
Yeah.
Oak Street location, but you know,
Yeah.
people's mental maps for margaritas, they're always in flux.
Right. I almost think that we're seeing a little bit more sort of Honduran, Central American, Guatemalan, Peruvian, a lot of Peruvian.
It's interesting,
So
yeah.
that's pretty interesting.
Peruvian on
Yeah.
Ferret Street.
Yeah.
Another,
Yeah.
really?
And Pavo Real, right there in Broadmoor.
Love
Great
That's
Mexican.
a delight.
That's great.
That's a delight too. Yeah, so much of a mix. Do you have a favorite Mexican restaurant?
Absolutely. On the tip of my tongue is Chilango's. It's in Kenner, and it's fabulous Mexican food, you know, down to the core, home cooking, just traditional, old-fashioned stuff with a great backstory. The guy rolled into town on a food truck right after Hurricane Katrina. I mean, before a lot of New Orleans people had come back, this guy had set up shop slinging tacos out of a truck. And that evolved into a restaurant, you know, one way or another. He made it happen. The Top Taco Festival that they just had here in the springtime, he won all the marbles. He got 3 trophies. He beat everybody in town, big chefs, corporate restaurants, everything. And he's really the toast of Kenner right now. He's Chilango's. It's a little side street, you know, and shares a parking lot with a pool hall. Nothing fancy. But you go in and it's a really nice family-friendly Mexican restaurant, true flavors, good hospitality. It's the kind of place I love to find.
In terms of ambiance, and of course the food's fine too, is Casa Borrego, because you've got the live
I
music
love
in the
Casa
courtyard
Borrego.
on Aretha Castle
And
Haley.
brunch
Speaking
there
of-
is so good. Love Casa Borrega.
It's like a club when you go in there. There's music playing,
Yeah.
that outdoor
Dancing,
setting.
the dancing.
left out.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
always good margaritas.
Yes.
Always.
Yes. Yeah, we've got to search for the great margarita. Ian, you had suggested this, and I love next gen neighborhood joints. Say that fast.
Next gen neighborhood joints. That's right. It's a neighborhood joint. We know what it is in New Orleans, right? It's fried seafood. It's gumbo. There's probably some Creole Italian flavors rolling through there. You know, Mandina's, Lauz's, Katie's. I just named 3 places that are within blocks of each other in mid-city. But it's a template across the city. That's the New Orleans neighborhood joint. God bless them. I hope they never go away. But what's been so interesting is to see the next generation polish that a little bit, take it in a different direction, add some of their own flavors to it, and often that means stretching the menu a little bit more or working in some fresher stuff, some of the stuff that you might see in the farmer's market, turning up on their menus. Thinking of places like Hi-Hat, that's an exemplar of what we're talking about. But also the Munch Factory, that's an old Creole restaurant. They're working sort of the black Creole style there, but they're adding more modern touches to it. That gumbo, just, oh, it's fantastic, it's classic, but you might have that next to debris fries or, you know, tempura
Explain what that
battered.
is, just for the debris fries.
Well, you take all the junk and garbage and deliciousness off of a roast, just those little bits and pieces and juice. That's your debris, and you put them over some cheese fries. I mean, it's a little bit New Orleans, a little bit anywhere bar food. You put it together, it hits all those buttons at once. So, you know, dishes like that are, you know, they have oysters there. They have a really good baked chicken dish. It's, you know, it's New Orleans food, but with more of the sort of comfort food cravings that the next generation might have. And we're seeing more of these. Some of them, in some cases, are revamps. Sunray Grill out in Gretna, the last of that brand that used to be all over town, has really upped its game, in my opinion, lately. And by putting the focus back on local seafood. So this is a neighborhood joint where kids are coloring on the table mats there, but across the chalkboard, and when you walk in, you're going to find 5, 6, 7 different types of fish alone at this little place. I mean, some major bistros can't field that sort of array, but you know, a little neighborhood joint, when you're dedicated to doing local flavors, that's kind of where it leads you.
Poppy, you and I are breakfast fans.
Absolutely. And I simply can't get over the explosion of breakfast in New Orleans. Now, we're not talking about necessarily brunch, which New Orleans created and made famous. I'm talking about just breakfast. Did you ever think that the Ruby Slipper would have as many
many are there
locations,
now?
including, well, over in Orange Beach, you know? I mean, you can travel out of town to the Ruby Slipper. I mean, once upon a time, do you remember it was sort of Camellia Grill, and if maybe you'd had a little wild time, there was the Hummingbird. But now, breakfast. Where's your favorite place?
Honestly, it's my kitchen. I say this in all honesty. I kind of have a hard time going out to breakfast because the places are so popular.
Yeah.
On weekends, forget about it. We're not going to breakfast.
Right.
But you know, during the weekday, in the Ruby Slippers nearby, they have a lot of locations. I like that a lot. Toast, I think, does a fantastic job.
Yes. And they just opened a second location.
The one
Near
at
the
the
fairgrounds.
fairgrounds, right by the fairgrounds, too.
That's right, yeah. But, you know, on the weekends when I see people lining up for brunch, I'm usually probably going to wait for lunch. So.
Absolutely. And Asian, oh my goodness. There was
Yeah.
a time when it was just sort of Chinese, but not anymore. It's so much more.
I mean, I think there's always been a wealth of great Vietnamese food in New Orleans. But I think what we're seeing in the last couple of years is a lot of sort of kind of Asian fusion, but not the fusion of the 90s, a little bit more local, a little bit more Creole. My favorite places right now are Margie's Grill on Broad, which we talked about already, and Maypop, which I think is excellent.
And of course, then all that fun started at Mofo, where we could get a slice of hog's head cheese in our pho, and he was busy making that Mofo jokes. I love that, Michael Galata.
And the Mies is also come up right there. It used to be a convenience store owned by a Vietnamese family, and they went in a different direction, I believe, with their son and said, let's do this instead. But that, good pho there as well.
I think we're lucky in New Orleans that we have such a broad range of Asian restaurants because we don't have huge Asian communities beyond the Vietnamese community. That's like one of the core New Orleans communities now, in my opinion. But you know, we don't have a huge Thai population in New Orleans. We don't have a huge Chinese population in New Orleans. We really don't. But we do have a pretty good representation of restaurants for the
Sure.
families that we have.
And
They're going to
Korean
create
now
those.
too, huh?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
New Orleans people are learning some different languages there. They're working their mouths around bibimbap at the Korean restaurants and dishes beyond pad thai at places like Banana Blossom over on the West Bank. Fantastic Thai restaurant. But even these traditional Chinese restaurants, people are often looking for good dim sum. Over in the West Bank, there's the weirdly named but wonderful Panda King Fine Dining for traditional dim
My
sum.
favorite.
Yeah, and then down in the Bywater, Bao and Noodle, a little hole-in-the-wall joint that does just really good traditional noodle soups and the dumplings and of course the Bao, the savory cakes. So there's a lot out there for a city that of course is best known for our own food traditions.
Who would ever think that noodle and pie would go together?
Right?
But they're right there on Magazine Street, hand in hand.
You know, and I think for so long, everybody kind of thought of Chinese food as sort of cheap Chinese.
Sure.
And no longer the case. And also, so many variables. And in terms of Vietnam, Cafe Minh, a fine dining restaurant, white tablecloths, the Minh Bui right there on Canal near Carrollton. Really very much a part of the flavor of it, too. Do you have any other favorite Asian restaurants these days?
I do like Red's Chinese a lot.
Me too.
Yeah.
That's a crazy place.
On St.
It is
Claude?
on St. Claude. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. In the Bywater. I also, I love Bao Noodle. Margie's Grill is kind of my favorite, my go-to place right now.
In terms of restaurant hubs, but it's sort of linear. St. Claude's coming up, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And several of the places that we've mentioned today are on St. Claude Avenue, which again is sort of an unlikely stretch. It doesn't have the strict confines of like a Ferret Street. It's a lot more spread out. It's a major trucking route right down the middle of it. It doesn't have as much that natural Main Street potential to it. But boy, people have really taken to it. I think that the thriving Marini Bywater and St. Roch
you
neighborhoods
just
nearby
reminded
have
me,
helped.
the Cheesy Cajun. Who would have thought cheese melts on Bank Street? And we're talking cheese here, plenty of cheese. And the other cheese place, on Broad, too, huh?
St. James Cheese,
And
perhaps.
St.
down
James
there.
cheese as well, too. Just all Middle Eastern poppy.
But we've had traditional Middle Eastern, really good quality for a long, long time. I mean, it's hard for me to remember a time when there wasn't Mona's or Lebanon Cafe. But I think that New Orleans is in the forefront now of what the important Middle Eastern food is, which is Israeli. I mean, Ilan Shaya just won a James Beard Award for taking all that Middle Eastern influence, taking our local ingredients and making magic, which he does every day over on Magazine Street.
Absolutely. Do you have any favorites, Middle Eastern?
Yeah, I do, and all respect to what Alon's doing on the high end, but I still love little hole-in-the-wall joints. You find that they'll have a menu that looks the same that you've had everywhere else, but everyone puts their own little spin on it, their own touch. Sometimes family recipes, different styles. Cleo's comes to mind down in the CBD. 24-hour place for fantastic falafel, lula kebabs. Looks like it's a truck stop convenience store, but man, if it's after midnight and you're in the CBD, it's some of the best food you got to find around. And down all over town, Falafel King in Kenner is another good example of that. Just really good hands-on homemade touches to it throughout. And Shish Kebab House, also in Kenner. A lot of people remember it as Jerusalem Cafe in Mid-City from pre-Katrina.
Oh, yes.
Family's gone
Sure
there. You'll see a big family sitting down together for meals, big platters of food. It's very traditional and
In
excellent
the
food.
CBD, the falafel guys, that's relatively new, isn't it?
The Halal Guys,
Halal
that's
Guys,
part of a New
yeah.
York
That's
City
a
chain.
national chain.
yeah.
So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when we're talking,
okay.
when we're talking Middle Eastern, though, it's broadly Mediterranean. What they're doing at 1,000 Figs,
Figs,
Mid-City.
1,000 figs.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
a place that goes back. Started as a food truck, right, Helen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fat falafel, I think.
Yeah,
or-
the fat falafel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So still great falafel,
Yeah.
hummuses, dips.
And we go back to Mona's, always a great standby or the second kitchen for me sometimes.
Introduced a lot of people to the term falafel and probably hummus for that matter.
That's right. That's true. And for dessert, they actually have baklava. They make their own baklava there too, don't
Baklava,
they?
yeah. If they ever in the market, sometimes next door, they have havla, which is that almond paste dessert. It's so delicious, mellow flavor, really interesting. And what you're seeing, I think, in lots of restaurants around town, are more of these Middle Eastern flavors being worked into restaurants that aren't Middle Eastern at all. A lot of Italian restaurants actually are starting to work tahini and flavors like that into their menu, possibly following the lead of what has brought Alanchaya so much success. They're broadening that palette, and you can see it in a lot of different restaurants that aren't specifically Middle Eastern.
We can't forget about that great New Orleans staple Creole.
Oh yeah. For everything we've been talking about today, I mean, a lot of this stuff could happen in other cities. Let's face it, a lot of other cities have strong Middle Eastern populations, Vietnamese restaurants. We have no monopoly on those here. But we do on Creole. Creole's the creation of New Orleans and the thing that really only thrives here in this place. That's something I don't think we should ever lose sight of. Sometimes the old war horses get put in a box as, oh, well, they're always going to be there, or they're always going to be the same, or they're not as exciting as what someone's doing with kimchi and a snow cone or something. But really, when you go into one of these places and you look around the room, that's New Orleans. That's only in New Orleans.
What are your favorite traditional restaurants?
Well, of course, I Antoine's, Galatoire's, but Tujague's second oldest. Of course, Tujague's, but Chef Guy Sockrider is down there now. And so I find that at Tujague's and also Chris Lusk at the Caribbean Room, they're just kind of polishing up their Creole food in a whole new way for us. And there's John Folson. Look what he did at Revolution. That's certainly Creole food as well. So there's a lot of polish on Creole these days.
Do you have a favorite old New Orleans restaurant?
I mean, I'm a mid-city girl, so Mandina's is kind of my place.
Well, isn't that cool? I mean, when we say Creole, it can mean a lot of different things, right? But even in the restaurant world, we can stretch that from Caribbean Room all the way to Mandina's. I mean, from the high end to the neighborhood joint. And it's a wonderful heritage to have in this town.
And thank God we still have Dookie Chase going strong. God bless Miss Chase at 94. I think the restaurant just celebrated 75 years. And who would ever think that waiting to get on a plane, you could have Dookie Chase fried chicken at the airport?
Yeah.
Duke's place.
It's purple. No, there's a Dookie Chase, and then Duke has a place too. Duke's place. That's Duke the Fourth.
Yeah, we're happy for him. And Dunbars is back.
Oh, Dunbars! Thank goodness. I've been a long time for Tina Dunbar, but she finally reopened. She was the anchor of Ferret Street before Katrina, and now she's over on Earhart, luring probably a whole new generation and plenty of old regulars back. That gumbo, you just stare into that thing, and it's like a crystal ball to what made you fall in love with this stuff in the beginning. It's wonderful.
Well, now is the time to have a quick bite, if you will, because we want everybody to share their favorite current dish. I know that's always ongoing, but Ian, you start on.
It's got to be crab. We get them almost year round. We're so lucky at their prime, of course, in the summertime. But those soft shell crabs, and when I think of that, I think Clancy's, the way they smoke them, fry them, top them with a little butter, maybe a little more crab meat, and have a crab meat salad on the side. That's a hugely decadent meal, but my God.
Meat theme here, right?
Well, we had that little crab ban earlier in the year, and they maybe sharpened the appetite when we couldn't get it for a few weeks.
I tried. Helen.
For me, I'm going to come back to Margie's Grill and just the Southeast Asian flavors. For me, it's garlic, chilies, lime, any kind of mint, cilantro, and they'll just throw everything on top of everything that you order there. So I've been getting the pork knuckles, which I feel terrible eating, but I also love eating. But really anything there is fantastic.
Poppy.
Well, now that we've had the crab man over here, I'm going to be the pig girl and the meat girl, I can't get enough. And so, Isaac Toupe's rillettes, those like candied pig. And then I'd give my kingdom for a lamb neck. What he does with the lamb neck over there, I know you all have eaten that lamb neck.
It's delicious.
It rocks.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's like taking part of a big present of lamb.
Oh, yum.
Well, I have to chime in. We're back to Mandina's here. One of my favorite dishes these days is the shrimp remoulade at Mandina's and the corned beef and cabbage, which is just offered on Tuesdays and Saturdays on there. And by the way, information on all of these restaurants, we still have one more topic, but I wanted to let everybody know that info on all these restaurants can be found on WYES.org. Just click on the tab for our Steppin' Out calendar and you'll see that. But we would be remiss without talking about pizza and the revolution of pizza.
It's coming around. What can you say?
I mean, John Besh, Domenica, of course, and then the pizza, Domenica.
And pizza delicious really is delicious.
We used to, people used to pine in this town. Again, like barbecue. Oh, New Orleans just doesn't have good pizza. Everyone always had their favorite. But I mean, now you can fight over different styles.
Yeah,
Pizza
what's
delicious
New York style? What would that be?
Yeah, that's that thin, big, floppy slices, multi-crust. You pick it up and you have to do a little origami to get the thing from falling on you. It's wonderful. Mid-City pizza is still my favorite for that style.
Yeah, they're great.
But yeah, Ferret Street again for that deep dish style pizza. New Chicago style pizza on St. Charles Avenue down there. And yeah, what they're doing at Domenica, actually using some fresh milled flour in their dough. I mean, it really makes a difference in the character of these pizzas they're creating.
Helen Pizza?
Mid-City Pizza as well. But I'm excited about the 1,000 Figs. They're coming out with a pizza place this summer.
That should be great.
Yeah, and I think they're also going to be using like freshly milled flour in their dough, and they'll have a bakery attached too. So I'm excited about that.
Poppy
That
pizza?
clam pizza at Domenica just really floats my boat.
I have to put in a word too, as a native Northeasterner, for the coal-fired pizza. That's very traditional up there in the Northeast, from New York all the way through Massachusetts, and they do a great version at Amici on Magazine Street. Too often overlooked, that style, but if you have an inkling for that coal-fired flavor that gets into the crust, that's the best place to get it in New Orleans.
Are we seeing any trends? Do you see anything coming forth in the near future, down the road?
Restaurant survival will probably be a big topic.
That's that abiding topic. Too many restaurants?
Yeah, I think there are. It's wonderful to have such variety and to be able to, as a consumer, to pick and choose. But in New Orleans, we have relationships with our restaurants. We don't want to see the beloved ones go away. There's no easy answer to it because we love the new ones too.
Is there a need for a particular kind of restaurant these days? Are we missing something?
My opinion, I would love to hear other people, but is more affordable ones. If they find a way to make them a little more accessible, but still interesting and modern. And I know our chefs are creative and they can come up with ways to solve the problems that are out there now. But we have a very healthy restaurant scene, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I do know that restaurateurs are struggling with the number of peers out there. And I know people who love to dine out struggle with how expensive it can be.
Yeah.
So there has to be somewhere in the middle.
Real quick, let's talk burgers. Favorite hamburger?
Favorite hamburger? The one at Shank Charcuterie. That one is great. Yeah, it's like this giant freeform patty. It's almost more of a steak than a burger, but it's a burger. It's
Great pick. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. You know what? I think I'm just going to be the old school girl and say, I'd still like to get a portical.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Ditto on both of those picks. But I really love Sammy's in Gentilly. Little Creole deli there. We're by the 610 in Elysian Fields. They used to be a butcher shop back in the day. They still make their burgers in-house, stack them up thick, and they're inexpensive.
And then finally, watering holes. Any favorite kind of out-of-the-way watering holes?
Well, I don't know if Finn McCool's could be considered out of the way. Certainly not for me, because my Labrador Retriever leads me there every time we leash up for a walk. But if I'm having a drink on a hot afternoon, that's where I'm going.
Helen?
Pals. Always pals. Yeah.
I guess we're acting like we are all Mid-City girls. I really love 12 Mile Limit. I always feel like I'm in hiding when I'm there.
Well, lots to, if you will, chew on. Thank you all very much. This has been a very quick half hour. Thank you for watching. Good night.